Hi everybody, this is Miss Bush and I'm excited to talk to you today about the Access Test. So in this presentation today you're going to listen to information about the Access Test and discuss questions you have about the Access Test with your advisory teacher and classmates. This is so you can be prepared to do your best on the Access Test in January. You'll know you're successful when you can tell why you take the test and have also practiced with some sample test questions. Expectations for today's presentation are that you stay engaged, so that means eyes on the presenter, share your thoughts and ideas, help everybody focus, so keep your discussion and comments on the topic at hand and keep side conversations at a minimum. Respect one another, and that means listening when a classmate or teacher shares, using kind words, and take responsibility for your actions. This is our agenda for today. First, we're going to talk about who's an MLL, then what is access? When is access? What does your score mean? Why should you try on the test? And finally, some tips on how to excel or do your best on the test. So who is an MLL? An MLL is a multilingual learner, or a student who's eligible to receive support at school with their English language development. At Hope High School, that's about 40% of our students. We're proud of our MLL students and the voices and stories they add to our community. We want our MLL students to grow their English skills so they have many more opportunities available to them, and so they're not limited in the future. What is the Access Test? The Access Assessment is used to measure MLL's academic English proficiency. So that means not just the language that you use to say, hi, how are you, and have a conversation with them. Unlimited time to take the test, but usually each part takes about a half an hour to complete. As you get more advanced and more proficient in your English, the test gets more complicated, and you may need more time to do your best on the test. When do you take the Access Test? Well, we're going to be starting testing January 8th, and we'll be testing until March 1st. We'll try and get most of the testing done in January so that we only have to do a few makeups in February. Usually testing takes about 3 days for students. So on the first day, you take the listening and reading sections. Those always have to come first. Then, the next day of testing, you take the writing test. And finally, the last test you take is the speaking test. And that's in a small room, right, with 5 or fewer students. Even though there's 3 days of testing, they might not be back to back. So you might do listening and reading one week, followed by writing later that week. And then a week or two later, you take the speaking test. When do you get your results? Well, unfortunately, we don't get results right away. You have to wait until May to get your results. You get a report sent home to your family that looks something like this. It has your score for the 4 different sections: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And then it also has an overall or composite score. That's an average of those 4 different areas. If you want to check your score from last year, you can ask any of your teachers, or you can look for your student ID number on the bulletin board outside of room 307. Room 307 is by the library and it's my office, so if you have any questions about your score, you can knock on the door and I'll be happy to talk with you. So what does your access score mean exactly? The access scores run from 1 is the lowest score and 6 is the highest score you can get. When somebody is just learning English for the first time, they probably have a score in the 1 range, and as they learn more and more English, their score goes up. Once you get in the 5 and 6 range, you're considered English proficient. A really important score is a 4.8 because that's a score that's used to determine if a student still needs to be in the MLL or ESL program. Once you get a 4.8 or higher on Access, you exit out of the MLL program. So you no longer need to have an ELD class and you no longer need that extra support to help you develop your English language skills. Why should you try your best on the Access test? So I'm going to give you 90 seconds, a minute and a half, to turn to somebody next to you and talk about the question. Oops, and my timer isn't working. So go ahead and talk. I'll move on to the next slide once 90 seconds have passed. So what did you come up with? Pause this video to talk with your advisor and your classmates about some ideas that you have. Then you can move on to the next slide and I'll tell you some ideas that I have of why you should try your best on the Access test. So here are some things that I think are important to know about the Access test and why you should try. Your results will determine your schedule for next year. So that means not only what ELD class, if any, you have to take, it also means how much flexibility and options you have on choosing classes. So depending on your score, you might have to take certain classes that have ELD support that only run at certain times, and this can limit what other classes you have to take. That you're able to take. You also might not be able to take the electives that you want. Another thing to keep in mind is if you have a class that maybe you didn't pass and you need to make up, right? You need to have that flexibility in your schedule to fit it in. So if you score higher on access, you might be able to fit that class in your schedule rather than having to take it at summer school or the next school year and putting off your graduation date. It's important to get the highest score you can before you go to college or university. If you're able to exit out of the ESL program, then you won't have to take ESL classes when you get to college, right? So that's a class that you don't have to pay for, and you can go straight into the career or the academics that you're excited about. Your score also is a way to show how much you've learned in English. So that can help you know where you are and also your teachers on how they need to support you. And finally, it helps the school. So let's take a second and let's look at these two different sample schedules. The schedule on the left is a student who scored a 2.1 on Access, and the schedule on the right is for a student who scored a 4 on Access. So pause this video for a second and think about what differences do you see between these two schedules? So what did you notice? I see right here that the student who scored a 2.1, they still have to take ELD, where the student who scored a 4, even though there's still an MLL in the MLL program, that 4 score means that they don't have to take ELD anymore. So they're able to take an elective that they wanted, which is art. I also see that the student who scored a 2.1 has ELD support in a lot of their classes. ELD support, those classes, there are only certain of them that run at certain times, and that means that you'll be with a different group of students, right? And the student who scored a 4.0, they don't have that ELD support, so they don't have that restriction on their schedule. Do you have any questions or any thoughts about what you see? Pause this video and talk with your advisors and classmates. All right, so we're at the last part of the presentation, how you can excel, how you can get a better score. So let's take a minute. I'll try starting my timer this time a little earlier. 30 seconds to turn to somebody next to you and talk about this question. What can you do before or during the test to get your best score possible? So what did you come up with? Pause the video to talk with your classmates and your advisor. Then I'll share with you some tips that I have for you to do the best you can on the test. So here are some things that I like to tell students. Before the test, it's a good idea to move your body. Also, you can listen to music. These are two ways to get you in the best mood possible so that you're ready to sit for a while and do your best. Another good tip is to practice. So you can do that in ELD class, and we also have after school access tutoring. That runs Monday and Tuesdays after school, and anybody is welcome to join. If you're not already signed up for access tutoring, you can see Miss Woofenden in room 205 and she can connect you with a tutor. Writing in a journal is another good way to prepare yourself. You can write about your thoughts about the test, what you're worried about, how you can do your best on the test, and you can also practice writing in English. Here's a big one, getting a good night's sleep. That's really important for doing your best on anything. And also eating your breakfast, right? Feed your body to feed your mind. During the test, you can remember to breathe. Take a deep breath to calm yourself. Think positively and concentrate on the question in front of you. Now let's talk about tips for the different sections. The first section that you'll take is the listening section of the test. In this section, you want to listen to the speaker, look at the pictures, listen to the question, look at the answer choices, and then choose an answer. Remember, you only have one chance to hear the recording in this section. The next section that you'll complete is the reading section. In this section, you'll look at the picture, read the question, read the words, and choose your answer. It's a good idea to read all the different answer choices and then go back and look at the question again. Sometimes you'll need to scroll down to see all the words. Here's an example of a question from the reading section. You can pause this video to read the question more closely and talk with your classmates about which answer you would choose. Here's another sample question. The third part of the test is the writing part. So in the writing section, you'll get a different difficulty question based on how you scored on the listening and reading parts. That's why it's really important to do your best on the first two sections so you get a more difficult question for the writing section. The more difficult the question, the more points you can get for it. In the writing section, you want to look at the pictures and read the words or questions. Then you type your answer on the computer. Here's an example question from a Tier 1 or 2 test. You can pause the video and look at the question more closely and talk with your classmates about how you would respond. Here's another part of the same question. Finally, the last part of the test is the speaking section. When you take the speaking section, first you want to check your headset and microphone. Before you start the test, you'll have to do a sample recording where you say your name and the school that you go to. If for any reason you can't hear your voice or you're not sure if it's recording, raise your hand and ask for help. A lot of students get nervous on the speaking section. That's really normal. Remember to relax and breathe in and out. Think about what you'll say before you hit the record button. Write notes to plan what you want to say. That's really important. And finally, speak in English clearly and don't whisper. You won't get any points for speaking in a language that isn't English. And you need to speak loud enough that the person that scores your response can hear what you're saying. In the speaking section, there's a model student, Nina. So the teacher asks a question and Nina gives an example response to show you how long to talk and the type of words and sentences you should use. Use the pictures to help guide your answer. If you make a mistake while recording, keep talking. Don't hit stop until you're sure that you're finished, because you only have one chance to record. Once you hit stop, you cannot record again. What is it okay to do during the speaking section, and what can't you do? You can pause to think before hitting record. Remember, you have unlimited time on this test. You can write notes while listening to the prompt or the question. You can write notes about what you want to say. You can ask for help on how to use the technology. What you cannot do is you can't use a dictionary and you can't ask somebody how to say a word. Here's an example of a speaking question.